Hello and welcome, Mark here, and in this episode we're going to take a look at the awesome and fabulous Granny. Look at that, isn't that brilliant? Of course we're just doing the one colour Granny, even though they're normally known for multiple different colours, but I'm just doing the one colour today. The Grannie Square is also, it has 2 setup rounds, which we'll go through in a moment, and it's not until round 3, it's the round that you just repeat over and over again. A Grannie Square can be anything from 2 rounds to 200, whatever you want to make. And of course you can use this Granny concept for making all sorts of things, from scarves, hats, ponchos, cushion covers, blankets. You can use it for all sorts of things. And with Christmas around the corner, it's an handy concept to learn for making Christmas gifts. That's really what I'm doing it for. I'm not changing colours in this one, I'm doing it in one colour. The changing colour one I will do another time, but let's just get cracking with this one, shall we? So let's get crafting. Right, I'm ready. I've got my slip knot on my hook ready to go, and you normally would chain 4, but because this is Aran weight yarn and using a thicker hook, I'm not sure if you can see that very well, I'm going to chain 5 instead, just to make the hole a little bit bigger so you guys can see it. So there you go, I've got 5 chains, and then we need to make a foundation ring. So we take that hook, put it through the first chain and slip stitch through both of the loops, and there we go, we've got a nice hole there for working your stitches in. And first thing first, I will be working over the tail, so if you want to make that centre hole a bit smaller, you can just pull on that tail like you do with the magic loop, and you can tighten it up a little bit more. And I always chain 5 to begin. The first 3 chains is classed as a treble, and then the other 2 chains is classed as the corner space. So let's work the first Granny stitch, shall we? And the Granny stitch is 3 trebles standing next to each other. So you do 1, 2 and 3. That is the first complete Granny stitch. We'll come back to this chain 5 at the end. So we've done 1 stitch and then we chain 2. This is of course the first setup round. Then we work 3 more trebles. That's another Granny stitch. There you are, that's 2 complete done. Chain 2 for the corner space. Don't forget to keep working over your tail, because then you can make your centre hole a little bit smaller if it turns out to be a little bit too big for you. Just makes it more adjustable. And there's your third. Chain 2, remember. And this is now where we've finished the round, and remember the chain 5 from the beginning, and that class as a treble. So in this one we only need to work 2. Oh, lost the tail there. So we only need to work 2 trebles. Tail's getting in the way now. And then we work a slip stitch into the 3rd chain up to join the round. There you go. You see that's quite a large centre hole, but you just put your work down each round, stretch it out, have a look at it, and there you go, see what you've done there. And you see that centre hole is quite big, but I made it quite big just so you can see how you work into it, because you're working round the chain and not through it. So if it's a bit too big, you can just pull on that tail and just tighten it up a bit. and once you've got it to the size you want it, you can just weave the rest of it in, and then that's it, it'll stay there. So that is the end of round 1, or the first setup round. Let's get to the second setup round. So first of all, we need to slip stitch into the chain 2 space. That moves us over to the corner, and again we chain 5 to begin. Again, the 3 chains counts as a treble, and the 2 chains counts as the corner. Into the same corner, because we're working into spaces, we work a granny stitch. Just a moment, my yarn got a bit tangled up. There we go. There we go, and that is the first full shell or stitch done in that corner. See, the corner's not finished, we'll finish it when we get back round to there. Chain 1 for a spacer. Some people say don't chain 1, some people do. The only difference is if we don't chain 1, it just makes your holes a little bit smaller. That's all it does. Makes it a little bit tighter, a little bit smaller. So of course it's all down to you. If you don't want to chain 1, don't chain 1. Simple as that. Now, so we're in the corner, we've done 1 granny stitch, chain 2, and then work another granny stitch, all in that chain 2 space. That's a lot of stitches in the chain 2 space, isn't it? And that is how all the corners will look. 1 granny stitch, chain 2, 1 granny stitch, all into the chain 2 space. We chain 1 to jump over this granny stitch here into the corner. See, round 2, all you're doing in this setup round is working your corners. One granny stitch, chain 2 for the corner, then make another granny stitch. Just 2, 1 more, and there you go. Chain 1 for the spacer, and look at that, we're into the last corner where you need another full granny stitch. So, and every corner is the same. You can think of it as 3 trebles, chain 2, and 3 trebles, all into the same chain 2 space. I'm losing the yarn there. Chain 1 for the spacer to jump over this side stitch, and remember the chain 5 from the beginning. That's part of the cluster or shell or stitch you like to call it. So you only need to make 2 trebles to finish that corner off. Into the third chain up, 1, 2, 3, make a slip stitch to join the round, and there you go, that is the second setup round complete. There you are, looking great so far, isn't it, eh? So the first round you're working the sides and the spacers, the corner spacers. The second round, setup round, you're just working the corners. So that is now set up to go. So round 3 is a round that you repeat over and over and over again. Right, and before we do round 3, don't forget, put your work down, stretch those corners out, have a look at it, admire your work as you progress. And that way you can always tell then if you've made any mistakes, like if you put 4 trebles in or only 2, you can go back and change it. So let's get on to round 3, and this is, like I said, this is a repeater round. Just get a few more bits of yarn off there. Again, we need to slip stitch into the corner, Don't make your slip stitches too tight. 3 chains counts as your treble. 2 chains counts as a chain 2 space. So into this same space we work a granny stitch, which is 3 trebles of course. Chain 1 for a spacer, and now look what you've got here on round 3. You've got a chain 1 space. All chain 1 spaces that run along the side of the row gets 1 granny stitch. And then chain 1 as a spacer before you move on to the next one. And you see that creates a side stitch. So you're working corners and sides from now on, and that's why I say it's the repeat around. There you go. And if you didn't chain 1 in the middle, it would still have a space, so you'll still see it. So we're in a corner now, so we will do 1 granny stitch, chain 2, and another granny stitch, all into that chain 2 space. Oh, uses a lot of yarn. Oh dear, can't get my tongue into gear. There you go. Chain 1. Now we're into a chain 1 space. So every time you come to a chain 1 space, it has just 1 granny stitch. Chain 1 when you're done. Oh, look at that, we're back into a corner. So every corners are all the same. Just getting a bit more yarn there. You can even think of it as 3 trebles, chain 2, 3 trebles, if you're not sure how to make a treble, I will leave a link to my treble tutorial and you can check that out. Right. Chain 1 when you finish the corner. Oh, chain 1 space, so chain 1 space only has 1 granny stitch in there. Chain 1, we're into, well, almost well, you can call it the last corner really, because you'll make a full stitches there and you just finish it off there. So corner space again, granny stitch, that's 1 granny stitch, chain 2, and place another granny stitch. Chain 1 for a spacer. The last chain 1 space, and of course the chain 1 space only has 1 granny stitch in it. Yeah, chain 1, and now we're back to the beginning of the round again, and because that counts as a stitch, you only need to place 2 trebles into that corner, into the 3rd chain, make a slip stitch. There you go, and that is the end of round 3. Don't forget, pop it down, stretch it out, stretch the corners out, have a look at it and think, wow, that's looking fabulous, isn't it? Just make one more round and we'll work the last round together. I'll start you off and then we'll meet you back up at the end. So remember what we do then is we slip stitch into the corner space, chain 5, first 3 chains counts as a treble, The other 2 chains counts as your chain 2 space. Into the same chain 2 space you make a granny stitch. There you go, chain 1 when you've done that one, and now we're in a chain 2 space, and on this round you see you've got 2 chain 1 spaces, and each one of those requires just 1 granny stitch. So you'll do 1, chain 1 for a spacer, then 1 more granny stitch. See, each round increases by 1 granny stitch. Each side increases by 1 granny stitch, so I say. And there you go, look, now you've got 2 going down the edge. Every corner, remember, as a granny stitch, chain 2, and another granny stitch. You need to just pull off some more yarn. And there you are, chain 1 to leave, and there you go, that is your first full corner complete and first side. Isn't that brilliant now? So just a reminder, just to be consistent, the chain 1 spaces only get 1 granny stitch, chain 1 to jump over. Again, you've got a chain 1 space there, so it just has 1 granny stitch in it. Chain 1 when you finish that. Now we're in a corner, so remember, a corner is 1 granny stitch, chain 2, and another granny stitch. And chain 1. So now I'll let you go, and I'll finish this off camera, and I'll meet you back here. There we are. So just going to finish this last round, just to remind you that in that last or first corner, last corner, you have that chain 5, and that chain 5 counts as part of your granny stitch. So you only need to do 2 trebles in that space, find the 3rd chain, slip stitch to join them, and there you go, and that is round 4 finished. Don't forget, stretch it out, have a look, see how it's looking. That's looking great, isn't it? And there's nothing wrong with using 1 colours. You can get a selection of your favourite colours together, make a load of these kind of squares, either 4 rounds, 6 rounds, whatever. You can even use odd numbers, you don't have to be even number rounds, just be consistent with them all, and you could just lay them all out to how you'd like the finished piece to look, and then sew them together. That's the least amount of yarnage way of doing it. There is other ways you can join as well, but I do prefer to sew them up. So there you go, that is the Grannie Square, and I hope you really enjoyed this video. So if you really liked it, please give me a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, subscribe, and if you ring that bell, you'll be notified every time I upload a new video. So until next time here on Marks Makes, bye bye.